Warning. You will hear some things in the coming story that do not quite make sense. This is 100% intentional. The NAS specials are intended to fit anywhere in the timeline, though some will logically take place after or before major story events occur. So please, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Kingdom Come. A Halloween special story. Written and narrated by ButterflyCoffee and produced for audio by Mr. Judge. Caitlyn had been working at Newton Abbot now for a number of years. The Jinty easily stepped up to hard work and had won the hearts of the majority of engines on shed. She seemed to take particular shines to Duchess and Hercule, both of whom were comforting to talk with, and Joe, who despite his previous misgivings, she had formed a close bond with. One day, Apanya had spotted Caitlyn working with Hercule in Hackney Yards as he passed by, and thrown a cheeky remark or two about former companies working together. Hercule laughed and told him to clear off with good humour, but Caitlyn had fallen strangely silent. Hercule didn't understand why. The two engines had been chatting to each other just fine moments ago. The Jinty remained silent for the rest of the day, seeming to be in a self-reflecting trance, and barely paying attention to what she was doing. Now at the sheds, the 4200 was managing to break through to her. "What happened with you today then?" he asked kindly. "You were doing just fine, then all of a sudden you were off and away with the fairies." "It was only that Panya, don't worry," Caitlyn mumbled. "You didn't mean any harm," Hercule comforted. "The Panyas here are lovely." I know, Caitlyn chuckled. "Still, it just made me think of something." "Well, what's bothering ya?" Hercule prompted Caitlyn when she trailed off again, and the Jinty took a breath. "I don't quite know where this popped up from, but he reminded me of Kingdom and all the horrible things he said to me when he was around." There was a snooty sniff from one side of the shed. "Always rely on former Midlanders to be complaining about us Westerners," Louise said haughtily. "True, Kingdom was one of our own, but he was an uncouth, ill-mannered thing." "Bit like you then," chortled Hercule. "You who butted in and decided she wanted to be mathing off again." "Cheek!" "It's true. Next time you go in the shops, I hope someone takes a rivet gun to you," rumbled Lizzie. "At least then it'll help the cork stay in your gob." Caitlyn and Hercule were left chuckling as Louise began motor-mouthing again. Duchess, too, found herself tittering before turning back to the two tank engines. "Well, if you ask me, dear Caitlyn, you have nothing to fear. You've long since settled and needn't worry yourself over such things. The past has passed, so to speak. And the best lesson you can take is that if one makes you feel like less of an engine, cease associating with them. They shouldn't concern you." "Duchess is right. Ugly bugger wasn't worth anyone's time," smiled Hercule. "I dare say he weren't worth the rust that was holding him together. We got your bunker." Caitlyn blushed at Duchess's compliment and felt a broad smile shape her face as she listened to her shedmate's advice. It made her feel warm and safe as sleep overtook her. It didn't last long. Soft scratching sounds and whirling pops of light started to float in Caitlyn's mind as she slept, growing harsher and louder with every second. The Jinty's face grew uncomfortable and her lips twitched. The noises of engines and people whispering soon joined the surreal orchestra. She should be accustomed to this noise, but she started shivering and mumbling, breathing harshly in and out. It was torture. It was horrible. It was...
You're going to rot alone.
A bursting chime whistle and a cloud of steam jerked Caitlyn back to consciousness. She gasped aloud and panted heavily, trying to calm her racing mind. What the hell? Where had that come from? Whose voice was that? It was so garbled and old she could barely make it out. No one she knew would tell her to rot, right? Not even Lizzie or Louise were that sadistic. Thinking someone was looking at her, Caitlyn's eyes darted to the right, and she saw Joe staring at her. He held her gaze with a fearful concern. She held his with a shaky relief. The tank engines didn't need to say a word to each other, but Joe knew Caitlyn had awoken from a nightmare and fretted for her safety. Caitlyn was happy to see him, taking in every detail of his face to deliberately calm her down, until she quietly fell back to sleep. They didn't notice the air suddenly seemed to freeze around the end of the platform. The next day, Caitlyn was slowly able to shake off the slight unease as she kept to her usual work of bringing coaches and wagons to and from where they were needed. The nightmare left behind a sort of cold shroud over her, which made her mind rush during quieter moments, but by late afternoon it was thankfully gone. Joe stuck close to Caitlyn as often as he could, keeping an eye out for her in a bid to see if she was still calm. The Jinty was happy to know that his presence was there. It helped her feel a lot safer. As she watched Joe take away a rake of coaches, Caitlyn saw Mr. Turner approach her.
There you are, Caitlyn. There's a slow goods run from Coventry due to stop here to collect some fish vans. I'd like you to arrange them, then bring them down to the station to be added to the train. By that time, Lizzie should be ready to take it on its final leg.
No problem, sir, Caitlyn replied, and under the light of a bleeding sunset sky, he puffed off to Hackney Yards to get the vans in order. The tank engine had arranged the vans in fine form, and patiently waited for her crew to receive word that the inbound goods train was ready and waiting. Sunset passed into twilight, and nothing happened. It must have been delayed. Not too much of a worry, I hope, chuckled the driver. Best wait and see what happens. Wouldn't mind going home, personally, shrugged the fireman. Caitlyn simply sat and let off a little steam. Delays were a nuisance, of course, but there wasn't really much to be done if it wasn't serious. So she and her crew continued to wait. Night came. It was thick and black and still. The moon and the station lights made every shape the Jinty saw seem to pop like pictures from a child's storybook. But this would have been quite the sinister storybook if ever she saw one. The station roof glowed silver, and the rails stretched all the way up to the curve at the top of the platforms. The engine and crew must have been waiting for hours to no avail. Everything remained eerily still. Is anyone cold all of a sudden? Caitlyn whispered to her crew. I've got a horrible shiver. Oh, probably got a case of the jitters, old thing, yawned her driver. Take it easy now. I'm not jittery, insisted Caitlyn, her breath pluming out in soft puffs on the air. As she stared back into the dark, something suddenly had her eyes as wide as dinner plates, and her whole frame went stiff. There, at the curve on the rails far ahead, she could see soft, dancing spectres of light. They were repeatedly splitting apart and clumping together like drunken fireflies. They looked so fragile and small. A sudden chill whooshed up the line, hitting Caitlyn and seeming to suck the heat out of her boiler. Oh, what's that then? breathed her driver. Told you I fancy going home, hissed the fireman. Caitlyn could hear the worry creeping into their voices. She continued to shudder, growing colder and more tense with every second that crawled past. The night air was now suffocatingly thick and seemed to have a strange sensation to it, like electricity was crackling all around the yard without you being able to hear it. The Jinty continued to stare on in dumbfounded fear, which suddenly mounted as a noise split the silence. Groaning, creaking, hissing, and clunking. Groaning, creaking, hissing, and clunking over and over again. The very tone of the sounds almost put Caitlyn's fire right in her smoke box. Her crew took a hold of the controls. Were they preparing to dart off if things got too hairy? The tank engine didn't know. She couldn't think. Her tremors grew worse as the sounds continued, softly growing in volume as they seemed to draw closer. Come on, get a move on down there! Ah! Oh, for fowler's sake! Everyone jumped in fright before jerking into action at Lizzie's barking voice. Caitlyn's driver was alarmed and fidgety, making him rough with the controls. Caitlyn barked and clunked wagons and vans about, almost as if she were many years young again. She hustled what was needed down to the platform and bumped them onto the back of the waiting train. What do you think you're playing at? Lizzie shouted crossly. You're not an amateur, are you? Sorry, Caitlyn called. It was all she could trust herself saying. Have a bit of bloody care next time, the 4300 growled. All was soon ready, and Lizzie was given the clear to start. With a push from Caitlyn, the goods were soon on their way, rumbling into the night. Caitlyn slowed to a halt, watching the red light from the guard's van slink away into the darkness and vanish. She was done now. She could go back to the shed and relax. The heck was that? Caitlyn could see something in the shrubs next to Tucker's maltings. Come on, old girl, shivered her driver, and he pulled on the reverser. Caitlyn began backing down the platform, silent in fright, as she kept seeing that grisly, rusted-up face staring right at her from the old brewery. I really don't want to do this. It was late the next evening, and Caitlyn had been instructed to take her small goods up to Plymouth, which had missed the stopping train earlier that day. She felt awful, having a fitful night's sleep at best, and being distracted with her work throughout the day, unable to phase that horrific image from last night out of her mind. She stood waiting in the platform, feeling a sickening hollowness in her firebox. Lizzie harumphed, standing opposite her on the northbound line. Oh, stop your boiler aching and just get on with it. Can't you do it? You're much faster than me. I'm already booked on a passenger train to Bristol. Caitlyn sighed sadly, wishing she didn't feel so uncomfortable. Lizzie, she asked, do you believe in ghosts? Where'd that come from? Well, I can't help but... Caitlyn kept trailing off, unable to put a sentence together. Absolutely. The mogul spoke bluntly, with no feeling or care. Oh, ghosts do exist, all right. I've seen plenty of them in my time. The trouble is, half of them don't know when to move on. I'd take care if I were you. she said in a low voice. But then again, I'm not you. Happy journeys. And with that, she moved off to the coaling stage. Caitlyn really wished Lizzie hadn't said that. It didn't make her feel any better at all. As the whistle was blown and the signal shone green, the Jinty could only wish that things would go off without a hitch. As she steamed past the countryside and the thinning streams, Caitlyn's mind was trying not to frantically race. She did everything she could to calm herself, staring at dimly lit villages nestled in the hills, counting the stars in the midnight sky, registering every clack as her wheels ran over the joints in the rails. While it all helped, her fear did not ebb. She could not feel comfortable. It was impossible to concentrate, but Caitlyn had to. She had to focus. Plunging into a tunnel, the Jinty watched as the ballast and rails flew beneath her in a blur. She listened to the barks and clatters she made, and noted the thickness of the steam as it hit the tunnel roof. When she looked up, Caitlyn was met with a sudden flare of an apparition's silhouette. Everything slowed right down. That sunken face looked at her. It had no eyes. It smiled a toothless grin.
You guys are not alone.
Caitlyn snapped. Screaming louder than she'd possibly screamed before, she burst from the tunnel mouth. Everything suddenly sped up again, faster than last time. The tank engine's eyes were tightly shut as she raced along, her crew trying everything to make her slow down, but they barely had control. This train may as well have been a runaway. Everything went by in darkened streaks or quick flashes of light. All Caitlyn knew was she wanted to get as far away from that disgusting, grizzled thing as soon as humanly possible. A blinding, panicking fear had her in a death grip, forcing her along, faster and faster. She didn't know she was past the last bridge until it was too late. Only then did her wheels obey the command of the brakes, throwing out sparks and squealing in hopeless terror as she skidded through the station, onto the dock complex. The buffers were coming up fast. It wasn't enough! It wasn't enough! She'd never stop now! It was too late! It was all too late! She didn't want to die! As the dust settled, a frantic buzzing of voices filled Caitlyn's smokebox, and she opened her eyes, only to look down and find the churning green sea below her. A raging ache engulfed the front of her frame. Things were bent, mangled, and cracked. Her front wheels felt weightless. Caitlyn soon realised. She'd crashed through the buffers and was dangling over the edge of a quay, her remaining 4 wheels and goods train the only things keeping her aloft. With a final horrified glance at her former foaming tube, Caitlyn's eyes rolled back. Everything went black and still. Hercule had awoken that morning to find trains in disarray, and Joe running here and there like a mad engine. It turned out Caitlyn was missing. The 4200 stepped in and helped to get everything running smoothly again, before Joe suddenly darted off. Hercule was left to manage alone for most of the day. He was valiant in his efforts, but most of the trains that left were now delayed. The larger engine didn't know what had happened to his smaller shedmate, but he hoped everything was all right and did his best to cope with the mounting traffic. Just like old times. Joe didn't return until later that evening. The sun was gone, but light blue streaks hung over a predominantly indigo sky. He was hauling a works coach and a flatbed, where Caitlyn, out cold and badly battered, stood with her eyes closed. Hercule looked on in horrified disbelief. "What happened?" he said breathlessly.
Caitlyn was involved in an accident,
said a voice. Hercule looked to the left and saw Mr. Turner standing on the platform, his shoulders sagging.
She passed through red signals at speed and came off at Plymouth docks, narrowly avoiding the sea and an untimely fate.
Hercule saw too that Joe was visibly shaken, face pale and trembling slightly.
The damage is severe. We're lucky she's still with us,
Mr. Turner said quietly.
She will not be available for some time. I can only hope we can manage until she's repaired.
The 4200 accepted the information, but with none too little shock. Every engine was prone to accidents sometimes, or maybe the right circumstances permitted them, but for this to happen to Caitlyn? Hercule had to know what happened. He got his chance when, after being clocked off by his crew, he asked to be moved down to the workshops instead of the engine shed. The cleaner was surprised, but acceded to the request, so Hercule found himself side by side with Caitlyn, who had been taken off the flatbed. Poor thing. Caitlyn? Hercule suddenly heard soft, pained moaning, and Caitlyn's face scrunched up. He looked on as the Jinty's eyes lazily fluttered open, feeling very relieved. Caitlyn groaned louder as all the aches and pains came flooding back. "Easy there, old thing. Take it nice and easy," Hercule soothed. "You're all right. You'll just feel like the front end of you's an accordion. That's all." Caitlyn made another horrible groan, trying to register what happened. It took a lot of effort to think past the heavy curtain of black fog in her mind. Huh? Hercule asked. "What is it, darling?" I saw... Caitlyn's small voice struggled to come from her. A gasping sniff made it worse. I saw... No. Couldn't stop. Wanna run. Hercule couldn't make out anything else she said. His own mind was whirling in a frenzy. Someone told Caitlyn she was going to rot alone? Well, that wasn't true. No one would say that to her. Nobody on Shed was that sick and twisted, were they? Unless... Hercule's mind flashed to a single image. It was so sharp and crystal clear, like a photograph. It seemed to burn.
Make us Westerners look like effeminate, incompetent beings.
Him. He did this? Had he? Hercule wasn't sure. But a single glance back to the face still heaving and screwed up in anguish, and he knew instantly. The 4200 hadn't seen Caitlyn that scared since he was last about. It left him without any doubt. time to have a date with a devil. Another eerie, starless night, with the moon on high, making everything glow silver. Hercule stood too, on that sloping curve outside the platforms. He'd had enough steam to get there himself. Now with no pressure left to even move, he couldn't get back. But that was okay. He'd wait this one out. He'd turn up soon enough. Right on cue. The 4200 saw a group of soft spectres of light dance together, clumping into an abstract shape. The air suddenly grew cold, still and heavy with crackling energy. The spectres finally formed, and there he stood. Every line on his calloused, hideous face stood out. It smiled, then suddenly frowned. "Evening, Kingdom," Hercule said smoothly. The Panya's ghost sat there, not moving. Hercule decided to approach it with the policy that had worked for him his whole life. Brutal honesty. "Let me be straight with you. I've dealt with your nonsense for a long time. I saw it when I were young, and I saw it when she were young. Suppose you were expecting her to roll up, eh? She would have. Except your visits nearly landed her in Plymouth Bay." Hercule had trouble controlling his irritation. "If I'm ever fortunate enough to get there, I'm not going to have the patience to deal with you when I'm your age, right?" That grating voice scratched out a laugh.
You can't hurt me.
Hercule closed his eyes. He gathered himself together to blot the sound away. Then he looked back at Kingdom's ghost. He smiled. "Do you know why I was transferred here?" The spectral Panya was quiet. Hercule knew it was his cue to speak. "You remember when the station were rebuilt, right? All the way back in 1927? I suppose you do. You and your brothers were struggling. Not one of you could meet the demands needed. You were all fading fast even then, but you wouldn't admit that to anyone. So on you went. Then me and my brothers came along. We were stronger, younger, had our own ideas. Oh, you didn't like that at all. Made it even worse for you, didn't it? Must have been quite a blow to your already wounded pride. You didn't like what we thought of or did. Tried to scold or abuse us for moving trains safely in one go rather than waste time splitting it into sections. You oft told us, if I remember right, that bragging too much rots your frames. Certainly explains how you ended up." Hercule chuckled with a flourish. Kingdom looked furious. Those empty sockets bulged, and his ghostly form violently quivered.
So, you still cannot harm me. I am an apparition.
"True," Hercule admitted nonchalantly. "But here's the thing. If I was built to replace you, then I know for a fact that sometime, somewhere, something will be built to replace me. Something stronger and younger. And I know they'll most likely cut me up, like I did to you. then I'll be an apparition myself. And so help me. Hercule stared hard at the ghost wavering before him. You better make yourself scarce from here, 'cause if you haven't, and I find you when I'm a ghost, you don't want to find out what I'll do to you. Kingdom's shape quivered, then madly dispersed, vanishing into the black in a hasty fear. Hercule stared up at the sky. Now that his work was done, it was time to get some sleep. After all, if he wasn't rested enough for Lizzie coming back with the goods train in the morning, he might just have to give up the ghost.